folks. You're listening to the Jobs Podcast. I am your host, Tim Hendricks. Your time is valuable. I'm not going to waste it. Let's get right to the interview. Good morning, folks. Thanks for joining me on the Jobs Podcast. Today we have Derek with us. Derek and his wife own a solar company, and he is a master electrician. And we're going to do a deep dive into his education, his upbringing, and the nuts and bolts of his job. Welcome, Derek.
Thanks for having me on.
You bet. So let's go ahead and start with where you were born, your family, early influences, and education, and just kind of how you grew up and moved into the career that you're in today.
Yeah, so I was born and raised here in Springfield, Missouri, so I've never left here. I lived kind of on the southwest side of Springfield, went to Horseman Elementary School, which is also the same school that a guy by the name of Brad Pitt attended. Pershing Junior High, Kickapoo for high school. So in high school, kind of started taking some business classes there. I was a member of the FBLA, which is the Future Business Leaders of America. Kind of sparked some interest there. Lived with my dad, who ran his own business ever since I can remember. And I had began working for him through my youth, really, helping him go into job sites. And then, it was more formal as I got into high school, where he actually paid me. And then I continued to work for him out of high school.
What type of, was he a builder or what did he do?
He was a subcontractor for builders.
Okay.
Is what I would say. So we did central vacuum. So that was his main thing, kind of the bread and butter that he started with.
Sure.
And then from there, it expanded into other low voltage items, such as home security, music intercom systems, home theater. We would do wiring for cable TV and actually install satellite television and some security camera stuff. Kind of all the little low voltage things that was kind of its own little niche market.
So you had a pretty early influence and hands-on training with doing wiring and running cable and splicing and doing all that stuff.
I did. So like even with the central vacuum systems, they run a low voltage wiring along with all the piping that goes to, turn on each outlet throughout the house or even have a switch on the hose. And then as we moved into the music intercom systems, the security systems, that was heavy on wiring, landing wires, doing some programming. So I had lots of experience in homes, new construction and existing, a little bit of commercial, but mostly residential. So I've done a lot of that.
And this is while you were in, say, junior high and high school?
Yeah. So at that time, we hadn't branched into as heavy into the wiring stuff. So it was more central vacuum systems. I kind of started getting into the security and then the music intercom. And by the time I was out of high school, I was working for him full time. And that's when we got more heavy into some of that, which I was a part of because I was interested in like home theater. And so I would kind of learn how to do that. And I would take that on myself of figuring out how these components of work go together, how to control them. And that kind of branched us into more opportunities because I had interest in the desire to learn it.
How long did you do what you just mentioned, the low voltage stuff and the home theater and whatnot? What transition into solar? You're out of high school, you're working, you got a check, but then you shifted gears at some point.
Yeah. So, and I skipped over one little piece of, I did take a few business courses at OTC.
Okay.
I didn't go to college right out of high school. I didn't feel, my dad was willing to send me to college and I just felt like it was going to be a waste of his money. I wasn't the greatest student. Homework wasn't for me. I was okay in classroom, but, to take something home and get it done.
Yeah,
I wasn't always the best at, but I did take some business classes and I did enjoy that. And I did learn some some good things, and maybe we'll point on this or touch on this later. But there's one thing that really stuck with me that I still remember today.
Go ahead,
But
please.
Empathic listening is what it is. So,
Okay.
as we communicate, a lot of us want to communicate what's on our minds, and and another person talks back to us, and they're communicating what's on their mind, but we don't always listen or actually hear and understand what they're saying. So sometimes they're talking and it just kind of breezes right on past you, and you just, because you're thinking about your topic and what you want to say next. And
Right.
so I learned to kind of stop, slow down, really listen and understand what they're trying to communicate, and you can solve a lot of problems that way, and just things go smoother. So you know that's not necessarily even a business thing, but that was probably my greatest one takeaway from taking classes at OTC, and that really stuck with me. You have to understand somebody, and they may be a poor communicator. So they may be trying to tell you something and you're not getting it, and you've got to pry and dig deeper to really figure out what it is that they're trying to tell you, and then you can, sales, part of what I do now, I'm in the sales position.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to, that really helped me, through that process. But even when you're doing the installation, you've got to understand what somebody wants and goal. So that was a big deal for me. And I didn't necessarily know it at the time, but it just kind of stuck. And I feel like I became such a better listener. So now I can stop. I don't talk. I just think about what the person's going to say.
I can see that being advantageous in sales because it's hard for you to cater your end product or to satisfy the desires of your customer if you don't take the time to listen to know what it is that they actually want.
Correct. Yeah. But so I took a few classes there, continued. Now that was in my early 20s, and I continued working for my father until I was, I think, about 28.
Okay.
And I guess I felt like, when I was young, I thought I was going to take over my dad's business and do all that. And then as I'm in my later 20s, I just see that it appears I'm going to continue going down the same road. And I felt like I wasn't learning some of the business things that I wanted, and I was just more of an employee, and I just sent out, and that just wasn't enough for me. I wanted more. I wanted to do more. I wanted to learn more. And so my stepfather, who was married to my mother, my parents had got divorced when I was in elementary school, going into junior high. And he had been doing solar, and he lived off grid on solar.
Oh.
He needed some help, and I kind of started working for him part time. And before long, it was full time. So I fit really well because we're doing wiring, we're running conduit. It's all things that I was very skilled at. And so it was a match. And so I started into the solar business when I was, I believe, 28 years old.
What would the time frame have been? Was that, I don't know how old you are. So was that, 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
I am 46 now. So, and I worked with him. We did primarily solar installations on boat docks.
Okay.
So there's a problem with boat docks where they move in and out. So electric cords aren't the best thing. As you move your dock out, the electric's got to move with it. And it's either down in the water, just kind of laying on the ground, rubbing around, which an electric wire in the water seems crazy to start with.
Yeah.
Or you've got it overhead. You've got a reel, and you've got to reel it in and out. And then some lakes started mandating that you have solar because they just didn't want the electric coming on the docks at all.
Okay.
So So those were standalone systems. So, the boat dock would kind of be off grid, if you will, with solar. So I learned um, a whole lot of how to do off grid systems. Conduit wiring, we would have to submit CAD drawn engineer stamped plans to the Army Corps of Engineers, get approval. So there was an approval process. Uh, and so, I was kind of handling all facets of this. So I had done quoting and sales when I was working for my dad and in the the home construction stuff, and so I knew how to do that. So that transferred into solar. And it wasn't long that I'm doing the sales, the quoting. I'm putting all the plans together, submitting it to the Corps of Engineer. I'm going out and doing the installation. And so I was just I was able to handle all of it. I was even started running QuickBooks. So I was doing billing, invoicing, paying vendors. So I really started to get a feel of, how to run a business and all the things that go along with it, along with the help from my wife, Ashley. So there's, some input from her because she had previously ran her own business. She had a floral shop. And so she had done all this stuff on her own. And to her previous experience, she had a similar thing. So she worked for a floral shop when she was in high school and out of high school. And that lady that owned that business taught her how to do everything. And so she was running that business. And then later on, she ran her own shop for a while in Springfield. So she was able to help me. And then, there was times when even she was coming in and handling all the bookkeeping and things while I was busy and out working.
It sounds like a pretty tough office to have when you're down just on boat docks. I would imagine you spend a lot of time at Table Rock Lake. That's, or Lake of the Ozarks.
So not so much Lake of the Ozarks because they are not an Army Corps engineer lake.
Oh,
so they are owned by Ameren Electric, the utility company. And so it's very easy to run electric on there, mainly because the lake doesn't fluctuate. They let it down a little bit in the wintertime to repair things. But for the most part, that lake stays at the same level. Things don't move around. So, and they just don't have the requirements. So it was Table Rock, Bull Shoals, Norfolk, Beaver, Pomme de Terre. I went into Oklahoma, Lake Eufaula, Lake Tenkiller. I've been down to, I believe it was Lake Austin, some other lakes. So, been all over the place.
Were these installs that you did typically a day job for installing the boat dock solar setup, or were you there for multiple days?
Most of them were a day job. So we could, if all we're doing is installing the solar power system, it was absolutely a day job. And then we had a pontoon boat. So everything was set up on a pontoon boat. We would launch that, pull it in. All our tools are right there. In the beginning, we didn't have that, and we were carrying everything onto a boat dock. That was difficult because Table Rock, Beaver Lake, Bull Shoals, some of these, it was a very long walk from someone's house down to their boat dock. So the pontoon boat changed things. It's just a work barge. But we would also run the electric lines and conduit on the boat docks. So there may be a brand new boat dock, and it's either a 2-slip or a 4-slip, or it may be a 12-slip, and they want lights and receptacles, and so we would also install all that. So if it's a large dock and it needs all the conduit, wiring ran, lighting, receptacles, and the solar installed, that can make that a 2-day job.
I see.
Some of them were just an existing boat dock, and they wanted to get rid of the electricity from the shore, so that there's a shock hazard or a shock potential. So when you bring power from the shore, from your house down to your boat dock or a utility pole, that is a grounded system. So if you were potentially to have a wire fall in the water, and it's not GFCI protected, which is what you try to have everything be. It's what it's supposed to be. It's GFCI protected. So if there's any fault, it trips a GFI. But if that is not there, or there's a malfunction with it, whatever the case may be, and a wire, even an extension cord plugged in to the dock, somebody drops that in the water, that pathway is trying to return to the source, which means, there's a circuit or a loop. So, from the house, we'll just say, from the electric panel of the house, it goes out on the hot, would go to the boat dock and return back on the neutral. The neutral is bonded with the ground conductor. So if a hot wire falls in the water, it's trying to take the path through the water to the ground, the shore, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Water is not a very good conductor of electricity, so it doesn't actually trip a breaker, and it doesn't conduct very well. If a person gets in that path, a person is made of salt water, and they conduct electricity much better than salt water. And that's how people get electrocuted while swimming around docks that have some sort of electrical problem. So the safety aspect is a big reason why a lot of people wanted to put solar on. So we would go onto some of these docks. We would take the shore power off. Their dock was already wired. We would install a solar panel or panels on the roof, and we'd have a box that had batteries and an inverter in it and charge controller, and we could come in and put that all in and power up their existing stuff in a day.
Besides lights, what type, you said receptacles earlier when you were talking about the install, what typically, because I know you're probably limited to a certain extent by the amount of power that you can provide, what would the receptacles typically be used for on a boat dock?
Boat lifts.
Oh, so, okay.
So they've got a boat lift. So that's the big deal, is people want to get their boat out of the water. And so they have a lift. They may have a fish cleaning station that requires a water pump.
Okay.
To pump water. They may want to do a radio. Fishermen have chargers on their boats to charge their trolling batteries.
Okay.
So we kind of would do an intake on a specific boat dock of, you've got 4 slips, and a lot of times there was different owners of each slip, and so we'd have to say, okay, what's everybody doing on this dock? And that's how we would size the system. So back to Lake of the Ozarks, part of the reason that our systems wouldn't work very well there is their usage on a boat dock is much higher than the other lakes. So, for example, the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't allow you to do a lot of things on your boat dock. If they want it to pertain to boating and not where you have refrigerators, televisions, lounging areas, ceiling fans, stuff that uses a lot of power continuously, like what Lake of the Ozarks does. So Lake of the Ozarks, it's very common for them to have a refrigerator and televisions. Of course, there's large boats there, so you've got cabin cruisers that are maybe plugged in that are using power 24 hours a day, and that it's just very difficult to match a off-grid solar power system up to that. Versus at Table Rock Lake, you've got somebody, if they've got a pleasure boat, all they really care about is lifting their boat up and down, and maybe a few other things, running some lights at night, so you can turn lights on.
Is there a certain wattage cap that you have with the Corps of Engineers? Like you can't generate more than 1,000 watts via solar, or you can't have over 200 amp hours of battery, or is it just kind of whatever you feel is necessary for the requirements that you've got at that specific dock?
Yeah, so it's just the requirements of what they need.
Okay.
So the bigger docks, when you get into like the 12-slip community docks, those generally have pretty large systems on it. So they've got a large battery bank. They've got a large solar array on the roof. And a lot of times we would even put timers on the inverters, because what would happen, a lot of times these people from out of town, so you get somebody that comes from a whole nother state, comes down, uses their boat, and then they plug something in to their boat whether it be a dryer, dehumidifier thing or a battery charger, whatever it is, and they turn the system on and then leave. Well, that can run it dead, especially in the wintertime. So we would have it set up with a timer where you would get like 4 hours of AC power down on the dock, and then it would shut off. And that would prevent somebody from just draining all the power out of the system.
To go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, what was it about solar that drew your interest and made you move from the home theater and the low voltage stuff into the solar? Was it kind of a business decision only, or is it something that you find really interesting and you enjoy, or was it both?
At the time, I didn't look at it that way. So it was another job that I felt like maybe I had more opportunity to grow and learn. And then as I got into that, I started enjoying it more and more. I just kind of tripped over this, I guess I would say, and found something that I really enjoy doing and that I ended up being good at. Same thing, when I got into the solar, there's a lot of things I didn't learn. These battery systems and inverter systems would be very complicated. I didn't understand them. I would take the manuals home with me, read them at night to try to learn and better myself, and get that figured out. And I'd kind of always done that. I wanted to know it. I wanted to be better. I would do that stuff on my own time. All this time, I'm just an employee, but I wanted to, be good at it. I wanted to know it. I wanted to understand it. And no matter where I worked, I took ownership and pride in what I did, and I treated it like it was my business. So I never had the mindset of, I'm just an employee, you need to worry about that, or I'm not getting paid enough for that. Sure. I would take it on. It was just something I always did.
Well, that's a good mindset to have. It typically lends itself to success if you're just constantly moving forward and trying to learn every aspect of what you're doing like you own the company. I mean, that seems like that would benefit you across the board. Oh.
Yeah, for sure. And so just doing it that way, I learned everything, got confident, was good at what I did. And so I continued to work for my stepfather until I was about 35-ish, so about 7 years. So during that time, I should add, we did some residential and some commercial projects. Solar was not very well known. People had maybe heard about it, but they thought it was weird or odd or didn't know anything about it. There wasn't regulations in place to connect with the utility grid like there is today. That didn't happen until 2008. So the solar business was pretty slow. And things just kind of slowed down. And, so we kind of ran out of work, I guess. And so I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I kind of worked a job for a little bit with a friend of mine doing some auto work. And I did for that a little bit. Then decided to start doing some solar projects on my own. So I was still working with my stepdad. He really kind of liked to focus in on the boat dock stuff. And I liked doing the residential and the commercial work. There was a lot of details to it and a lot of paperwork. And it just they kind of go on for a while, and he didn't like that part of it. So the boat dock stuff he liked. It's a, quick thing as far as the sales process, the installation process. There's a little bit of paperwork, but it wasn't too much. With the residential and commercial solar, First, you've got to do your intake, which is talk with the customer and find out how much utility are you using on a monthly basis. And then you've got to figure out a system that's going to match with that, where you're going to mount the solar panels, whether it's going to be on the roof or on the ground. And if they're going on the roof, will they all fit, or do they have to go multiple places? In the beginning, this is all done by hand. So I'd have to get up on the roof and do measuring and kind of sketch this out on paper, and then use some programs provided by the government actually online to figure out what the solar production would be. And then I'd built my own spreadsheet that would show kind of this system size will do this for you, and be in a percentage. Let's say this will cover 88% of your yearly electric bill. It's going to cost this much. And then if they wanted to do that and move forward, so then the next thing is I'd have to do a net meter application with the utility company. I would have to get a one-line diagram which shows electrically how everything is connected. It shows the solar panels, the inverters, a little bit of the home electrical system, and a solar disconnect. And then I would put that together with all the specifications of what their system is, which is spec sheets for the solar panels, the inverters, the racking, and kind of put that all together in a package and would mail it in to the utility company. And we have to get their blessing, their approval.
Do you find that most utility companies work well with you, or do you get, maybe it's better now, but in the early days, did you get a lot of resistance or pushback or kind of dragging their heels because you're cutting into their market essentially, or no?
For sure. So It is better now. I feel there's still some utility companies that you can feel kind of them pushing against solar. We still are able to move through the process, but they're definitely doing some things that are making it difficult. Mm-hmm. There's some companies and utilities that never cared and are really easy to work with, and it's not a big deal. But yeah, in the beginning, there was definitely some tension.
Do most customers that have it put on their roof, are most modern day roofs able to handle the additional weight? I mean, I know solar panels aren't drastically heavy, but is there usually any structural reinforcement that needs to happen with someone's roof? Or is it really a case by case basis? Or do you find that most of them can easily just withstand the additional weight?
Most of them can withstand the additional weight.
Okay.
I have ran into a couple cases where I had to go in and add some additional bracing. So part of what I've got to do is get up in the attic, take photos, take measurements, and give this to a structural engineer to review. Because in most areas, Springfield, Greene County, Christian County, so after I would get the approval from the utility company, next thing is I've got to get a permit. So I've got to submit all this stuff, except they want a letter and a stamped set of plans from a structural engineer and an electrical engineer.
Okay.
So there was a few cases where the structural engineer said, hey, I'd like to have you add some more supports here, here, and here. We did that. But for the most part, solar panels, if they're roof mounted, add like 2.4 square pounds or 2.4 pounds per square foot.
Okay.
So it's pretty low.
Yeah.
The snow load that we're supposed to have is 20 pounds per square foot. So I assume what the structural engineer is looking at is, does this roof support 23 pounds per square? So basically that would be the additional weight of the solar panels, racking, wiring, and if we had a large snow that was 20 pounds per square foot.
That would be a fair amount of snow, would it not?
I don't know what that comes out to in inches, but that's the sizing we're supposed to go to, and then 150 mile an hour wind load. So there's also uplift. So if it needs to grab a hold of something, You know, it's got to be able to stand that amount of uplift.
The permitting process that you've mentioned a couple of times, is there a general, this is probably going to take 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. What's the average timeline?
It varies.
Okay.
It varies by system size. So solar power systems are rated in kW. So you may have an 8 kW system size, or you may have a 16 kW system size. But there's kind of a break at 10 kW. So if you're 10 kW or less, the utility company treats it differently, and they will push it through possibly a little quicker. If you're over 10 kW, they can take longer. So the mandates that are set by the ordinances of the state. So there's what's called a Easy Interconnect Act, Easy Connect Act. I think that's actually what it is, that was set in forth by the state of Missouri to allow people to add their own power production with solar on their property and tie into the utility company and actually send energy back to the grid.
And that would be net metering, correct?
That's the net metering, correct. If the system is under 10 kW, they give the utility company 30 days to review that and respond. If it's over 10 kW, they give the utility company 90 days to respond.
Okay.
So I can submit a set of plans, and sometimes it will be approved in less than a week. Or I've also had it where I'm over the 10 kW threshold and they take right up to 90 days. Possibly that's dependent on their workload, so I may send something in and maybe they're really busy or behind, and it takes a while to get to it. That I don't know on that. So that part's out of my hands there, but
yeah.
But we submit to the utility company and wait to make sure they get the approval. Then at that point, I have the engineers go ahead and stamp my plans. I wait to do that because the utility may require some changes, and I don't want to have stamped plans if they do. But then I get my plan stamped, and then I submit for a permit. Depending on where it's at for the permit, they normally take about a week. I've had some of them take longer. I've got one jurisdiction now that it's taken me, I'm right at a month to get a business license.
Good grief.
Because, like I keep business licenses in areas where I'm, constantly doing work, but there's other areas like Columbia, that's where this is. I'm going to do some work in Columbia, and I've been working to get a business license for a month. Now, that's through the holidays of Christmas and New Year's, and people, I'm sure, taking off, and and I'm not in a hurry for it, so it hadn't been a big deal. But all this paperwork does eat up some time, so it can take months to get all this paperwork done. When we are ready to install, the installation, depending on the size, can be a few days to a couple weeks.
I wanted to go down a rabbit hole real quick. The net metering, I know it probably depends on the state that you live in. If you're in California, Colorado, Florida, some places where they've got a lot more robust solar industry, I guess, for lack of a better term, or I don't quite know how to explain it, but there's more rebates and things. They're just more involved from a government level. Is Missouri just kind of basically a federal deal, and so then whatever the feds line out for the industry standard, that's what we're going to get? Or is it depend on the power company that you're dealing with? Like, how does the net metering typically play out?
Yeah, so I'll touch on the rebates first.
Okay.
So the state of Missouri has never offered any rebates. There are other states that have, or they've had different incentives that are called SRECs, or Solar Renewable Energy Credits. So, if a person installed solar, they somehow figure out that's worth X amount of credits, and they're able to sell those and get money. In Missouri, we don't do any of that. The only thing that is available currently is there is a 30% federal tax credit, which is at the federal level.
Okay.
Previously, there have been some utility incentives where they actually paid a rebate.
Oh,
That was something that was mandated by legislation. I don't know who did this, but if it was a basically a for-profit entity for a utility company, which would have been like Ameren, Evergy, and Liberty. Those companies would have to pay rebates.
okay.
Any of the co-ops or municipal utilities, like city utilities of Springfield, were exempt for that, so they didn't have to do any of that.
Okay.
But all those rebates were up to a certain amount, which I think was like 2% of their capacity. And I think everyone has reached those goals or the rebate tiered off, but there's no longer any rebates available from any utilities.
The net metering, that is essentially, and I'm probably going to butcher this explanation, but you are sending, if you're using less than what your solar array is producing, then you are sending electricity back into the grid, and the power company is paying you a set rate for the power that you are not using and you're sending back to them. Is that correct?
Well, sort of.
Okay.
So they don't actually pay you
Or
anything.
credit you, maybe is a better way to say that.
I would say credit. So here's how I like to explain it.
Okay.
So you would have a bidirectional meter. So in the morning, when the sun's coming up, you're buying all your energy from the utility company. So everything's coming in from utility. As the sun starts to come up and hit the solar panels, you start making your own energy. So you start feeding into the house as well. At a certain point, you reach enough, make enough power that you stop buying energy from the utility and you're providing all of your own power. Then as the sun gets stronger, because as it comes up, it's weakened through Earth's atmosphere at a glancing angle. So as we get to about 11 o'clock, from about 11 to 2, that's when it is the strongest. And that's because there's less atmosphere to diffuse it.
Okay.
So we'll just say at 11 o'clock, you're making peak power. You're providing all the energy for the house, and you are sending power backwards into the grid. And your meter's keeping track of all this. So then you do that all day. Now you do the reverse going into night. So as you go into night, now you're buying power from the utility. Well, so ideally, just to dumb this down, what we want your solar power system to do is make twice as much energy as you need throughout the day. And then at night, you're just pulling that back and using what you stored in the utility grid.
Oh, okay.
Now, you are doing this all on credit. So your meter counts, so let's just say overnight you pulled in 100 kilowatt hours. And then during the day, ideally, you're trying to push 100 kilowatt hours back into the grid, and that makes that zero.
Okay.
So, but it is all done on credits through the meter. So the only caveat to this, they do that for a month. So they let you exchange at a 1-to-1 rate all month long. But then when they come to read their meter and figure your bill, they're going to see who owes who. So either you have a surplus of energy or you're in a deficit and you owe them for however much energy that your solar didn't provide for you. If you produce more than what you used, they will carry a credit over to the next month, but they do that at what's called avoided cost, or what is the cost for them to make the energy, or what I like to just call the wholesale rate.
Okay.
So they've got their wholesale rate. They sell to you at the retail rate. So they'll carry over that avoided cost or that wholesale rate of energy over to the next month. On average, utilities are anywhere from 10 to 15 cents per kilowatt hour. And the avoided cost rate is 3 to 5 cents per kilowatt.
So this isn't a money-making venture. This is just an elimination of cost for the...
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So, some people will call me and they think that they're going to put in this huge system and sell a whole bunch of energy back to the grid, and that the utility is going to write them a big check at the end of the month, and they won't. So they'll credit energy to you.
Okay.
And that's it. And then after a year's time, if you still have a credit built up, they wipe that out and you start over.
Okay. I do have one specific question about generating power. We live in, an area that can get storms, pretty rough storms from time to time. We're on the edge of Tornado Alley. I looked into solar a number of years ago. I like it for the self-reliance aspect. At the top of my list is I really like alternative energy for that regard. And I'm going to get the term wrong, I know it, but there was islanding or anti-islanding, where essentially if I lost power and I had a solar array on my roof or a ground mount system, I wasn't able to access the power because they didn't want that. It was to protect the line workers that were down the street working on the power lines, which obviously I would not want to hurt anybody. Is that still the same kind of arrangement, or is there something that's been done with batteries, microinverters, things of that nature, that allow you in a disaster where you're not getting power from the grid to still generate and then, most importantly, access and use the power that your array is generating?
Yeah. So what you just mentioned is what I would call a straight grid tied system. So if it has no batteries, then you've got DC energy. It sends down to an inverter, goes through an inversion process, and comes out AC energy. And it's able to push energy into your house and backwards to the grid. And so if the grid goes out, your inverter senses that the grid is out and it shuts down and it stops producing energy.
Okay.
And they're really not able to produce their own energy anyway, because they require the sine wave from the grid to work off of and push the energy back against. There are some caveats to that. So there are some inverters that have a secondary output. So you've got a grid input that has to go dead if the utility goes down. But you can have a secondary output that goes to an outlet that would provide up to 2,000 watts of power that you could plug an extension cord in to run a refrigerator or something.
Okay.
And the reason it's done that way is you can't really put a transfer switch in and try to power your whole house, because if your demand is more than what the inverter can output, which is 2,000 watts, which isn't a whole lot, it just stops working.
Okay.
And there has to be enough solar resource. So if you've got a 6 kW solar array, but it's cloudy out or there's snow on the solar panels or whatever happens, it can't output 2,000 watts. Then you go into a battery backup system. This is the best of both worlds. So you can sell back to the utility grid. If the grid goes out, the input for the solar inverter stops and just stays disconnected from the grid that's down. And then you've got an output that can feed like a sub panel that you could have your refrigeration, your well pump, whatever things that are important to you to power in the outage, and you're powering that off of batteries.
Okay.
Now you use your solar to charge the battery. So you're able to run 24 hours a day, and you're able to do that forever as long as your energy usage doesn't go above what your solar is able to charge the batteries.
Okay. Does it matter in that scenario whether you're using microinverters that are on the panel or one stationary inverter? I think, is it Solark is a brand that you have used?
Yeah, so I'll say it doesn't really matter, but
Okay.
there are brands out there that do certain things better than others. So I do use the Solark brand, and It is more made for off-grid living than what the microinverter. So microinverter brand would be In Phase. So they do
Okay.
have a system. It is, in my opinion, more made for what's called time of use shaving. So what that means is in other areas besides ours, it's starting to happen here, but it's very prevalent in other areas, like let's say California, where they charge different rates for different times of the day.
Yeah, I'm already seeing that down here where I live.
Yes. So with some of these systems, they're made to just inject power to your house to try to prevent you from buying from the utility grid from like 7 in the morning to 9 in the morning, and then again at 5 to 7 in the afternoon or whatever the time is.
Hmm.
If there's a short outage, it will also power a few things, but they're not very good at surging. And what I mean by that is, so when you've got a well pump that you're trying to power, there's a huge surge that happens on the startup. Same with an air conditioner.
Okay.
So some of these systems aren't very good with that, where like the Solarc system is. So it's got a large surge. So now we're starting to power whole house air conditioners with these systems. In the beginning, I never did that because it was such a big startup jolt. With the equipment's getting better, the battery technology is getting better, and we're starting to power more and more things.
I'm going off of a distant memory. Is Solarc, at one point, I thought they were the only one that was EMP certified, I guess. Are they still that? Are they the only ones, or is that becoming pretty common?
I'd say they are still the only ones. So
Okay.
I'm not aware of anyone else that does what they do. So they make an inverter that they call EMP hardened.
Oh,
And so
okay.
they've done something internally to the inverter to help protect it. And then when they send that specific inverter out, they send out some pieces to put on the wiring of the solar panels and on the wiring of any of the electrical devices in your house to help uh, prevent against an EMP from taking out your electronics.
Okay.
Uh, I've done a few of those. What is more common now? So, like, I'm working on a system that we're just finishing up where we had a solar inverter, actually a couple of them, and we put on a product called an EMP shield. What that is, that goes in line like what a surge protector would, um, but they've kind of taken up that space of EMP protection. They're a certified contractor with the military. They've done testing with them. I feel like their product is kind of the best on the market for people that are concerned about, EMP stuff.
Sure. I could talk about solar all day long. I kind of geek out on this stuff. I enjoy learning about it. But you had talked earlier when we were talking before the interview started about you started in the solar industry first, and then you became an electrician. So you're working, you're doing the solar installs and stuff, and you did, I think you said automotive for a short bit. When did you take the step and get certified or trained to be a master electrician?
So, as I mentioned, when I was about 35, I kind of was stuck, trying to figure out what to do. So I started doing this on my own, started my own business. I was just handling it all myself until it grew. And then I began hiring people. So, and I had been working with a master electrician that I'd previously worked with before. So he was helping me with, some of the stuff to get permits, do some of these sign offs. I would have to get him involved and pay him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hired him full time. And was my plan was just I would always have a master electrician working for me and other installers. And then we had a little hiccup along the way, and I realized that I was kind of caught where I always had to have one of these guys. And so I decided that I wanted to, hold that myself. So there's many ways to go about getting your licensing, but I had enough apprenticeship. So you've got to have 12 years of verifiable experience or hours. So I had to do, get a bunch of hours from my previous work doing, electrical wiring, get notarized forms, submit all this to the city of Springfield, and then I had to take the test. They have a master's exam test. And so I had to take that test, pass it, and then get my master's license with the city of Springfield. Then shortly after, an organization formed that you could actually get your contractor's license, electrical contractor's license for the state of Missouri, which you had to have, your master's exam pass. And so I was able to get that. So now I'm currently able to go into any city in Missouri and do electrical work with that license.
Is that license, is that typically done by the local authority, like in your example, the city of Springfield, or is that a state or a federal test? And approximately how many questions are on a test like that? Is it just written, or is there a practical portion to the test, or both?
So as far as the test itself, it is done through a third-party testing facility. I can't remember what that is called, but it is a standardized test across the United States that's only administered by suitable places that give exams.
Okay.
So as I'm taking this exam, there's doctors in there taking their exams, and this is where you go take these.
I got you. Okay.
So once you pass that test, now I'm able to show this to the city of Springfield to get my master's license only with the city of Springfield.
Okay.
So this was a big problem before. So I would have a master's license with the city of Springfield. But if I wanted to go work in another city that's not close by, so everyone else would kind of reciprocate with Springfield that is close by. Mm-hmm. But if I was to go to St. Louis, let's say, they wouldn't, reciprocate at all with that. And they would want me to do their apprentice program for however many years and go through their ranks to get their master's license.
I see.
And this how it was with several places, several cities in Missouri. So it just kind of prevented me from being able to work there. Once the organization formed that came up with the Missouri State Electrical Contractor's License, they all had to, adopt that license and allow me to go and pull permits and use that license. So that helped a lot in Missouri. Lots of other states had already had that for a long time. So we were a little later on that, but so I'm able to use that same test scores to show to get that.
If someone wanted to be an electrician, and I'm not asking you what you make, but can you even ballpark what your typical salary would be for someone who is an electrician, like the gentleman that you hired that would do your solar installs and whatnot? What?
Yeah, so that's been quite some time ago. So today, it's varying, so it's, depending on, so there's 3 steps to be an electrician.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people that say they're electrician and they're somewhere in one of these steps. So there's apprenticeship, so a true apprenticeship means you're working under a master and you're being supervised by either a master or a journeyman electrician.
Okay.
And they're watching over your work and they're teaching you. Or you may be doing an apprenticeship program at a school. Colleges offer some of this. Then there's journeyman. So to get a journeyman license, you've got to be an apprentice for 4 years to be able to be considered to be able to test to actually get your license.
Okay.
And then for the master license, if you've done step by step, I feel like it's at year 8.
Okay.
You could do that. I had to go use 12 years of apprenticeship because I did never get my journeyman's license. I just got straight to my master. Um, but as far as the testing, it was all written or multiple choice, open book. I don't remember how many questions there were, but I spent the entire time working on my test, which I think was 5 hours.
Wow. Okay. So it's not a 50-question test then.
No, it was. You had to use time management skills. I knew I had X amount of minutes per question, and if I couldn't find it and figure it out, I would mark it and come back to it later. I would go move on. Once I finished, then I came back and started trying to figure out the questions that I couldn't get quickly. And I did that until the end, and then just, a lot of it's multiple choice.
Sure.
Just kind of guessed on some things at the end that I hadn't finished. As far as starting pay, I'm going to assume a journeyman electrician is going to want to start at $25 an hour, $25 to $32 an hour. I don't know that I know what a master pay range is.
Okay.
There's not a whole lot of master electricians,
right,
for whatever reason. So the journeyman,
that's your most common one.
Yeah. As far as a licensed electrician, there is a lot of people that would fall more in the apprenticeships. That's where the biggest class of actual workers or installers is at. Is in the apprentice. There's a lot of installers that are very good electricians. They can mend conduit, they can pull wire, but the practical part is difficult for them. So they may go in to take the journeyman's test and can't ever pass it.
What type of person? You don't strike me as someone who likes to sit behind a desk just at a computer all day. You like to be out and about doing things. Is that an accurate statement?
I do. So with my business, I've kept a small business just for quality control, peace of mind. I really want to do good work and make people happy. And I want to be happy about the work that we're putting out, that it's good work. And what I found is when you grow your company larger, that becomes very difficult to control. And I just decided I couldn't stomach, lots of happy customers, because that's what's going to happen. I mean, there's just no way around it.
Quality over quantity.
Yeah. So I've stayed smaller. So just because I do the sales part, I submit the plans. I do all of the technical paperwork, computer work aspects of our business. My wife Ashley handles all of our insurance. She does all the invoicing, pays all of our bills. That's a full-time thing, just keeping up with all that and the regulations and getting our taxes done and all of that. Mm-hmm. But it does require a fair amount of computer work, which I don't mind terribly. But yes, I sit at my desk, and generally I want to get up and go do something, like get out, get outside. And then when I go out and actually work, I love doing the work. And it's a funny thing, because most people, probably including myself, when you're out working in the field, you think you're doing the hard work, and that your boss, whoever that is, has got the easy job just sitting behind the desk.
Yeah.
The easy job sitting behind the desk isn't always easy, because you don't always want to be there. You'd rather be out doing somewhere else. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stress involved, because you're juggling a lot of things. Problems pop up. You've got to figure out how to solve them. And then when you go out in the field, all you're worried about is just doing your work. And if you're good at your work, you can do it efficiently and do good work, make it look good. And you stand back and you look at it, and you see what you've built, and there's a sense of pride and pleasure there.
Sure.
So I still go out and do some things myself. I do a lot of EV charger installations. I enjoy doing those. I do some service work for some other companies where they've got problems, and I go out and enjoy going out and meeting with people and working and, solving whatever their issue might be. And I don't mind the desk part of it either. But yeah, it's I certainly don't want to sit behind my desk, every day, all week long.
The solar industry, 20 years ago, it was, I don't know if niche is the right word or niche, however you're supposed to pronounce that word, but it seems like solar nowadays, it's getting easier to do your job from the standpoint of people are more familiar with solar. It doesn't seem so niche. It doesn't seem so fringe. It's very common. We see solar panels all over the place. Your industry seems like it's just things are going to keep getting better in that regard. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I saw some competitors come in and really start ramping up advertising and have 20 some salespeople, and they're every show you go to, everywhere they're out there. They really drove our solar markets. They really helped me because they really got the exposure out there.
Right.
The problem is there's been a lot of solar companies that have not been so great. So there's some negative connotations out there. And I run into those quite a bit because, like I said, I'm contracted for a company to do service of people that have problems. So I run into those, frequently, and I try to give them a good experience and hope to shed a good light on our industry.
The technology has changed quite a bit. Batteries, it wasn't too long ago where they were huge and bulky, and lithium just wasn't as prevalent as it is now. Is it the Life PO4 or PO4? I forget the specific term of the new lithium batteries, but everything just seems to be getting smaller, more efficient. The panels that used to cutting edge was 100 watts. Now you're 450, 500 plus watts out of one panel?
Yeah, so it depends on what the size is, but commonly for residential, I'm using a 410 watt panel. I've got a commercial one, which is a physically larger panel that I'm going to be installing this year. I think they were 650 watts.
Wow.
Is what they are. So, yeah, so the industry gets better and better. People are getting more aware. I feel like the solar industry is starting to settle in. There's a lot of companies that started up and didn't know what in the world they were doing, but wanted to get the solar industry. They're getting better now. And some of the ones that weren't good are, they're gone now. So I feel like things have stabilized. It was kind of the Wild West there for a little bit, because there was, when these utility companies were offering rebates, there's a lot of door-to-door sales stuff going on and telemarketing, and I'm sure some of that's still happening, but a lot of that's calmed down, and I feel like we're at a pretty good place now as far as an industry in Missouri.
Are most of the solar companies or the solar panels and batteries and inverters and things, are they made in China, or do we have a decent manufacturing facility capacity here in the United States or in Canada or even in Mexico, I guess?
So I believe all the electronics are all made in China in some capacity, some form.
Okay.
Solarc is an American company. Their inverters are made in China.
Okay.
I believe all the battery technology comes from China. Solar panels are different. There's a lot of solar panels made in China, but there's a lot of solar panels made other places. So, if you want to get technical, there's some made in Malaysia and Vietnam and Singapore. There's also solar panels beginning to be made in the United States again. We had pretty good manufacturing here when I first got into this business. And then the Chinese market, their government was subsidizing the Chinese manufacturers, and it ran all of our solar manufacturing out of business.
Okay.
So I believe that's why tariffs were put in place previously against Chinese solar products specifically. And I did see that that did help to bring U.S. manufacturing back because it is here now, and there's some in Canada as well.
For my own knowledge, are there two or three North American manufacturing for solar panels that you've used and would speak highly of?
Q-Cells. It's a company called Hanwha Q-Cells. So they're not an American company, but they have started some U.S. manufacturing.
Okay.
Mission Solar is another one. They're based out of Texas. Canadian one is. There's Canadian Solar.
Oh, okay.
And there's another Silfab.
Okay.
That's made in Canada. And I'm sure there's a lot more than that. So there's a whole lot of solar panels. Some of my suppliers that I deal with just carry a handful, which is, product that I'm happy with and that I use.
What types of soft skills, if someone wanted to get into your line of work, what do you think you bring to the table as far as the soft skills that allow you to be as successful as you are?
The ability to do more. So, as I mentioned, when I was an employee, I was willing to do work outside of work hours that I didn't get paid for. And that benefited me so much in the future. A work ethic, so that just built a work ethic, and I'm not scared to, work at night, work on the weekends, and I don't have to say, no, this is a hard, 5 o'clock's a hard set time that I'm off work, in the whatever it be, whether it's physical work, computer work, phone calls. I have people call me in the evening, it's no big deal. Texting me all the time, and I can handle that.
Well, I was going to say, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, the day doesn't stop at 5. I mean, an 8-hour workday, 9-hour workday is just not usually how you're going to get ahead. The folks that I typically talk with, you are making calls on the weekends. You're in there burning the midnight oil, shooting emails and answering phone calls and doing the research and stuff. That's what it takes, especially early on, to grow your business, to pay your dues, to grind it out. And then you get to the point where you're successful and you don't have to do that or as much.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So
okay.
I'm at a point where things are a little more efficient. We're moving, and each piece of our puzzle kind of fits together. We know what one person's doing, and I don't have to do that all the time. In the beginning, there was times when, something had to get done and I had to do it, and you just spent the time. But again, it wasn't a big deal because I was already conditioned for that, because that's what I was doing when I was working for other people. So, regular employee, they need to accept that skill or challenge themselves to do more, even if they're not getting a monetary gain, or even if their boss isn't patting them on the back, but do it for yourself. Because
Sure.
When I was doing that, and then I transitioned into my own business, it was very easy. I already knew how to do that. I'd done it before. It just, I didn't even think about it. But I think that's a big transition for somebody that has not gone above and beyond very often to start their own business. That could be a difficult thing. You've got you're getting all the stuff coming at you, and your 8 to 5 thing doesn't necessarily fit that.
What's your best advice to deal with failure? I mean, we all are human. We all make mistakes. So if you make a mistake, what's the best way to move forward and learn from it?
Well, I guess it depends on, we make mistakes all the time. So, I've got employees that make work for me, and I talked to them about this, and I said, you're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes with my customers. I'll tell them something's going to happen, on your project, something is probably going to go wrong somewhere. You may know about it. You may not know about it, but
right.
somewhere there's going to be a problem. It's all about how you communicate, whether it's something with an employer, something with my customer, my vendor, just wherever the problem is. It's about communication, communicating, hey, Mr. So-and-so, here's what happened. I dropped the ball. I screwed this up. I'm sorry. I'm working to get it fixed. And you can take a very stressful situation, which is just, for example, let's just say that, this just happened to me recently. So we've got a job that we're trying to get completely finished and commissioned by the utility company before December 31st, because that's technically what has to happen to file a tax credit for that year. These people, my customers, are trying to get a tax credit for the year 2024, and they're depending on me to get all this completely done so they can get however many thousands of dollars. Let's just say it's a $7,000 tax credit. So it's a lot of money that these people are hoping to get. That's why they have purchased a system from me. Well, I keep having these little delays, and I ordered stuff from my supplier. We show up, I send my guys out. They're out there working, and they don't have something. So this is a mistake, whether it's my mistake, the vendor's mistake, whatever. This happened twice. And so both times, I mean, I can be super stressed out about it, or I just tell my customer, here's what happened. I'm doing my best I can. We didn't get this. I don't know why. I'm going to dig into it. I'm going to try to get here as quick as I can. It ended up all working out, and we got it all done. But instead of me carrying the weight of that problem, I kind of left it off my chest by admitting to the customer that, hey, this is a problem. I know it's a problem. I'm working on it. They accept that. And I think in general, people appreciate that much more than you hiding it from them and trying to fix it behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think people, they can be more reasonable than sometimes we give them credit for if, and it's a big if, they're aware of what's going on and they know that there is work being done actively to solve the problem.
Correct. Because if you hide it and just think you're going to fix it, and then it comes out and it doesn't get fixed as timely as you want, now this whole situation's built up where you could have addressed it in the beginning and kind of squashed it. So I have learned that with everything. I try to attack all problems as early on as I can.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, maintenance on our vehicles, everything. I say, if there's a problem, let's take care of it now, because if you don't, now you've got a problem here, you got a problem there, and all this stuff builds up on you, no matter what it is. So let's just take that stuff head on, and then it's no big deal.
Yeah. That's a common theme with a lot of the people that I interview is just rip that Band-Aid off, own up to it, address it, and then work to fix it and bring solutions to the table, not just I think the vast majority of the time that does make a huge difference in how things are received and dealt with. So if you weren't in your current line of work, what do you think, if you could go back 25 years and do a different career, any career you wanted, what would it be?
So now that I'm doing the position that I do, which is a lot of mathematics. So like in school, for example, when you take math class and you're doing all this stuff, how would this ever get used in the real world? Well, now I see it. It's my job is full of math problems to come up with answers. And I enjoy that. And I enjoy building these things out and solving these little problems, which makes me think that some sort of an engineer might be fun, because that's also what they would be doing.
I thought you were going to say math teacher for a split second there, but
no. So like an engineer is just dealing with so much math.
Yeah. What type of math are you doing with algebra, geometry, basic math?
Well, all
plotting. Okay.
And what I do.
Okay.
So like we do ground mounts.
Okay.
Well, when you're doing ground mounts, you've got to square things up. So you've got to use some geometry stuff. And then there's different methods of squaring things. But in electrical, so like when you're doing anything that's three-phase, you're actually using the square root of 3 for a lot of things. Just a lot of multiplication, division, and then as you get into more complex thing, you get more complex into the math. So and geometry was probably my favorite math thing, but I never got really good at complex math, algebra, or I never even took calculus or any of that. Now I can certainly see the value in that. In learning that and retaining that, because it certainly is applicable. Maybe not for everybody, but for what I do, absolutely.
What is the best compliment that you have received in your career?
So I get a lot of compliments that my employees are really good and that they really like them. And I feel like that's a reflection of me,
Yeah.
which is something that my dad taught me when I was working for. So, like when you're polite to customers, you pick up, clean up your mess. And I have good guys working for me, and I feel like I have shaped them a little bit. But so when I get that compliment, that makes me happy because I'm not out on every job site all the
Yeah.
time. And so my employees are a true reflection of my company. That's what the people see. And so when they're happy with that, that makes me happy.
That's good. It is funny how the little things, as far as cleaning up a job site and just common courtesy, nowadays they go so far.
Yeah.
Derek, thanks for taking the time to talk with me today. I know that you are a busy man, so I know you got a bunch of work to do after you leave here, but I learned a lot. I really like solar, so I was looking forward to talking to you about this. And how can people find you if they're looking for a solar system or electrical work or just whatever of the services that you offer?
So my company name is Solar Energy Services. So you should be able to search that and find it. But my website is solarenergyservicesllc.com. And I've got website with contact links, my phone number. Text me, email me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Derek. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you for
Have a good day.
having me on.
You bet.
Enjoyed speaking with you.
And that wraps up another episode of the Jobs Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully you found that interesting. As always, I wait until the end of an interview to ask you to like, subscribe, and share. I feel it's important that I earn that support from you. Thanks again, and we will see you on the next one.